I'm Audrey Maxwell, 28, and I've built my reputation as one of Boston's most sought-after tattoo artists. My father, the CEO of Maxwell Fine Furniture, never understood why I traded the family's three-generation legacy for what he called a filthy profession. 3 years ago, he removed me from the will during a dinner I'll never forget. The family fortune was officially beyond my reach. Then last month, my phone rang. It was Dad, asking if I could loan him $230,000 after my brother nearly bankrupted our family business. The irony wasn't lost on me. Let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this wild journey. Growing up as a Maxwell meant living with certain expectations. Maxwell Fine Furniture wasn't just a business. It was our identity, our legacy, our future. Founded by my grandfather Thomas Maxwell in 1952, the company specialized in handcrafted, high-end furniture that graced the homes of New England's elite. What began as a small workshop expanded into a multi-million-dollar enterprise with 3 production facilities and showrooms in Boston, New York, and Chicago. My father, Harold Maxwell, took over when Grandpa Thomas retired, transforming a regional success into a national brand through strategic partnerships with luxury hotels and interior designers. The Maxwell name became synonymous with impeccable craftsmanship and timeless elegance. Dad expected this legacy to continue through his children. Our family home reflected the business, a sprawling colonial in Wellesley with immaculate gardens and rooms showcasing the finest Maxwell pieces. Every detail communicated success and tradition. Family dinners often doubled as business discussions, with Dad at the head of our massive mahogany dining table, a Maxwell original, of course, pontificating about quarterly reports and expansion plans. My mother, Elizabeth, played her part perfectly. The daughter of a banking executive, she understood the social obligations of being a business elite's wife. She hosted charity galas, sat on museum boards, and maintained our family's social standing. Though warm and loving in private moments, she deferred to Dad in all significant matters. "Your father knows best," became her mantra whenever I questioned the status quo. Then there was my brother, Andrew, 3 years my senior and Dad's obvious successor. From childhood, Andrew shadowed Dad at the factory, learning the business from the ground up. By high school, he attended board meetings. By college, he had his own office at headquarters. Andrew embraced his golden child status, often reminding me of my secondary position in the family hierarchy. "The business only needs one heir," he'd say smugly when we were teenagers. "And it's never going to be you." My earliest memories involve art. While Andrew followed Dad around the factory floor, I hid in corners with sketchbooks, drawing everything I saw. I loved the rich grains of the walnut and cherry woods, the precision of the craftsman's tools, the transformation of raw materials into beautiful objects. But I didn't want to sell the furniture. I wanted to create beauty on my own terms. In elementary school, my art teachers praised my natural talent. My watercolors won regional competitions. My charcoal portraits captured not just appearances, but something deeper about my subjects. But at home, my artistic achievements earned only passing acknowledgement. "That's nice," dear Mom would say, placing my award certificates in a drawer rather than on the refrigerator. "Art is a hobby, not a career," Dad would remind me whenever I mentioned art school. By high school, the pressure intensified. While my advanced placement art portfolio earned recognition from several universities, my parents steered me toward business schools. Dad arranged for me to intern at Maxwell headquarters during summers, placing me in accounting and marketing departments despite my obvious disinterest. "You need to understand the business world, Audrey," he insisted. "Creative thinking has its place in marketing, but you need the fundamentals first." To placate them, I enrolled at Boston University's business school, dutifully attending classes in economics and management while feeling increasingly hollow inside. My sketchbooks gathered dust. My paintbrushes dried out. By sophomore year, I barely recognized myself. The vibrant, creative girl replaced by a depressed student going through motions to please others. My roommate, Tara Johnson, witnessed my spiral and intervened one rainy October evening when she found me staring blankly at a financial analysis textbook, tears streaming down my face. "This isn't you," she said simply, closing my textbook. "Come with me." That night, Tara took me to an underground art show in Somerville. The converted warehouse pulsed with energy, walls covered in everything from traditional paintings to graffiti art. But what caught my attention was a woman creating intricate designs on a client's arm. Jasmine Cruz, a tattoo artist with 10 years of experience, worked with such precision and artistry that I couldn't look away. "It's like painting," Jasmine explained when I approached her later, "but more intimate. The canvas has a pulse, a story. Each piece means something." I left that night with Jasmine's business card and something I'd lost: inspiration. The next day, I added an art class to my schedule. By the end of the semester, I was secretly taking 2. My grades in business courses slipped as my passion for art reignited. And on weekends, I began visiting Jasmine's studio, observing, asking questions, learning. For the first time in years, I felt alive. But I knew a storm was brewing. The path I wanted would put me directly at odds with everything my family believed about success, respectability, and the Maxwell legacy. The confrontation I dreaded came during spring break of my junior year. I decided to stay in Boston rather than return home, using the excuse of catching up on coursework while actually spending time at Jasmine's studio. My plan derailed when Dad made a surprise visit to my apartment. "Thought I'd take you to lunch since you couldn't make it home," he announced, then froze when he saw my living room walls covered with artwork and tattoo designs. His face transformed from surprise to disappointment to anger as I explained my decision to pursue art instead of business. When I mentioned tattoo artistry specifically, his complexion turned alarming shades of red. "Tattoos," he practically spat the word. "Maxwell Fine Furniture has a century-old reputation for class and refinement. And you want to deface people's bodies for a living." "It's art, Dad," I tried explaining. "It's meaningful work, Dad. It's a trend for degenerates and rebels," he interrupted. "No child of mine will throw away generations of respectability for some counterculture nonsense." The ultimatum came swiftly: return to focusing exclusively on business studies or lose his financial support. With 2 semesters left before graduation, the threat was significant. But something in me had changed. I couldn't go back to that lifeless version of myself. "Then I'll figure it out on my own," I said quietly. True to his word, Dad cut me off completely. My tuition payments stopped. My credit card was canceled. Even my cell phone plan, still on the family account, was terminated within days. Those next months tested everything in me. I moved from my comfortable apartment near campus to a tiny room in a house shared with 4 other students. I took a job waiting tables at a cafe near the art building and another stocking shelves at a supermarket on weekends. I applied for emergency financial aid and took out additional student loans. Through it all, my resolve only strengthened. I switched my major officially to fine arts, focusing on drawing and painting. Between classes, work, and sleep, I continued visiting Jasmine's studio, absorbing everything about tattoo artistry. My art professor, Diana Wilson, became another crucial supporter. Recognizing both my talent and my struggle, she connected me with paid opportunities to create illustrations for university publications and occasionally design logos for local businesses. "Your technique shows remarkable precision," Diana told me after reviewing my portfolio. "And there's something emotionally resonant in your work that can't be taught. Whatever canvas you choose, paper, skin, fabric, that quality will translate." Ethan Park, a fellow art student who specialized in digital media, helped me establish an online presence where I could showcase my designs. My Instagram account slowly gained followers as I posted sketches and paintings. Though I couldn't yet share tattoo work, the audience I built would prove invaluable later. "You've got a distinctive style," Ethan observed as he helped me organize my portfolio. "Clean lines, but with this organic quality. Detailed but not fussy. It's going to translate beautifully to skin." My mother attempted reconciliation, meeting me secretly for coffee a few times that semester. Though unwilling to directly oppose Dad, she slipped me cash on several occasions. "He'll come around eventually," she promised, though neither of us believed it. "You've always been stubborn, just like him." Andrew's response proved less compassionate. During a chance encounter at a restaurant where I was working, he made sure I overheard him telling his friends about my rebellious phase. "She's always needed attention," he said loudly. "Dad thinks she'll be back begging to rejoin the family business within a year." Despite these challenges, graduation day arrived with a sense of triumph. Though my parents attended the ceremony, the tension was palpable. Dad shook my hand formally rather than offering the embraces I saw other parents giving their children. Mom hugged me quickly, whispering congratulations while glancing nervously at Dad. My real celebration came later at a small party Jasmine hosted at her studio. Surrounded by new friends who understood my passion, I announced my next step. Jasmine had agreed to take me on as an apprentice. The apprenticeship paid barely enough to survive, but the education proved invaluable. Jasmine's reputation meant exposure to diverse clients and styles. I learned not just technique, but the emotional aspects of the work, how to make clients comfortable, how to translate their stories into art, how to create pieces that honored their experiences. My first solo tattoo, a small lotus flower on a breast cancer survivor, taught me the healing power of this art form. Carol, 56, wanted something beautiful over her mastectomy scar. "Every time I look in the mirror, I see illness," she explained during our consultation. "I want to see rebirth instead." When the piece was complete, Carol stood before the mirror and wept. "Now I can face my reflection again," she said, hugging me tightly. Word spread about my work with survivors. More clients came seeking tattoos to reclaim bodies after trauma, illness, or loss. While some artists chased trendy designs or celebrity clients, I found my niche in transformative, healing art. Social media amplified my reach. My Instagram followers grew from hundreds to thousands as clients shared their experiences. A feature in a regional tattoo magazine brought further recognition. Within 18 months of graduation, I had a 3-month waiting list and had doubled my initial rates. During this period of growing professional success, family connections withered. Holiday gatherings became exercises in uncomfortable silence or pointed remarks. Dad never directly mentioned my career, referring vaguely to my current situation. Andrew made thinly veiled comments about real careers and family loyalty. Only occasionally, through Mom's careful comments, did I glimpse troubles brewing at Maxwell Fine Furniture. Hints about challenging market conditions and Andrew's innovative but unproven strategies suggested all might not be well with the family business. The contrast between my growing career and my family's disapproval created a painful dissonance. I was finding my voice professionally while being silenced personally. Something would eventually have to give. The breaking point came during what should have been a celebration, my 25th birthday. Mom convinced me to attend a family dinner at their home, suggesting Dad had softened and might be ready for reconciliation. I arrived hopeful, bringing portfolio photos of my best work to share if the opportunity arose. The evening started awkwardly but cordially. Mom had prepared my favorite foods. Even Andrew managed civil conversation about neutral topics like the Red Sox season and the unusually warm weather. The facade cracked when Dad mentioned he'd been updating his will and estate planning. "The family trust needs to protect the business interests," he said, looking directly at me. "I've made some decisions about the future of Maxwell Fine Furniture." I nodded, expecting nothing. What came next still blindsided me. "I've removed you as beneficiary," he continued matter-of-factly, as if discussing a minor scheduling change. "Andrew will inherit full control of the company and the majority of our personal assets. Though I'd essentially anticipated this outcome, hearing it stated so coldly at what was supposedly my birthday dinner struck like a physical blow. You've chosen a path that contradicts everything this family stands for, Dad continued, warming to his subject. This tattoo phase. It's not a phase, I interrupted. It's my career. A successful one. Dad's expression hardened. Drawing pictures on people's skin is not a career. It's a filthy indulgence catering to people's worst impulses toward permanent self-defacement. Harold, Mom cautioned, perhaps this isn't. No, Elizabeth. She needs to understand the consequences of her choices. Dad's voice rose as decades of traditional values found expression. The Maxwell name stands for something in this community. We create beautiful objects that enhance homes, that families pass down through generations. We don't mark people like cattle or encourage this exhibitionist culture where everyone needs to display their feelings on their skin. His face had reddened, veins visible at his temples. This tattoo business is filthy, morally and literally. Needles and blood and God knows what diseases. That's not how modern tattoo studios, I tried to explain, but he steamrolled over me. You've disappointed this family. Thrown away advantages others would kill for. And for what? To be part of some alternative crowd? To rebel against traditions that built everything you've benefited from. Andrew sat silently, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he watched the scene unfold. Mom looked down at her plate, hands trembling slightly. So that's it? I asked when Dad finally paused for breath. 25 years as your daughter erased because I chose a different path? You erased yourself from this family when you rejected our values, Dad replied coldly. Andrew will carry on the Maxwell legacy. You've made yourself irrelevant to it. The room fell silent. Mom dabbed at tears with her napkin. Andrew examined his fingernails with exaggerated casualness. And something inside me finally, mercifully broke free. I stood slowly, dignity gathering around me like armor. Thank you for clarifying where we stand. I won't waste any more of your time or mine pretending we can reconcile your expectations with my reality. I turned to my mother. I love you, Mom. You know how to reach me if you want to. To Andrew, congratulations on your inheritance. I hope you understand its true value before it's too late. And finally to my father, I'm proud of the work I do. I help people heal, celebrate, and transform. My clients trust me with their stories and their bodies. There's nothing filthy about that. I walked out without looking back, the sound of the front door closing behind me with a terrible finality. The drive back to my apartment passed in a blur of tears and grief. Not for the money, I'd already accepted that loss, but for the family relationships that now seemed permanently severed. I'd held onto a childish hope that eventually they'd see my success and recognize the legitimacy of my path. That fantasy died that night. The weeks following brought a hollow period of mourning. Friends rallied around me, Diego from the studio bringing coffee and sitting silently with me when words failed, Tara driving up from New York where she'd moved after college, Jasmine offering both professional distraction and personal counsel. Families are complicated, Jasmine shared one evening as we closed the studio. My parents didn't speak to me for 2 years after I dropped out of nursing school to pursue tattooing. Now my dad proudly shows pictures of my work to his friends at church. The difference is your family came around, I pointed out. Because I succeeded on my own terms, she replied. Build something undeniable, Audrey. Success doesn't always change minds, but it demands respect. Those words became my mantra as grief transformed into determination. If my family couldn't accept me, I would build a new support system. If my father couldn't see value in my work, I would create value so substantial it couldn't be ignored. I threw myself into developing my business plan. With 3 years of experience, a solid client base, and growing recognition, the time seemed right to open my own studio. I researched locations, equipment costs, licensing requirements, and marketing strategies. I consulted other studio owners about their journeys. The numbers looked daunting, but not impossible. My savings would cover perhaps a third of the startup costs. Traditional bank loans proved challenging. Despite my growing reputation, tattoo studios still registered as high-risk investments to conservative lenders. Finally, a small business association specializing in creative enterprises offered terms I could accept. With loan approval in hand, I secured a street-level space in Cambridge, close enough to benefit from the student population but situated among established businesses that lent legitimacy. 3 months after being written out of the will, I signed a lease on the space that would become Inked Narratives. The name reflected my approach to tattoo art, not just designs but stories made visible, personal narratives transformed into art. Every element of the studio, from the soothing blue-gray walls to the private consultation areas, was designed to communicate professionalism and artistic integrity. The night before our grand opening, I stood alone in the completed space, simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. Everything I owned was invested in these rooms. My name, not Maxwell but simply Audrey, adorned the door. Whatever happened next would be entirely of my own making. 2 years flew by in a whirlwind of growing success. Inked Narratives quickly established itself as one of Boston's premier tattoo destinations, known for exceptional artistry and meaningful designs. What began as a one-woman operation expanded to include 3 additional artists and a dedicated receptionist. My waiting list stretched to 4 months for large pieces. Clients traveled from neighboring states specifically to work with me. My rates tripled from my apprenticeship days, reflecting both demand and the increasing complexity of my work. Industry recognition followed. My designs appeared in national tattoo magazines. I won awards at regional conventions for best black and gray work and most innovative use of negative space. Invitations arrived to guest artists at studios in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Social media amplified my reach further. My Instagram followers exceeded 100,000, drawn by the stories behind each piece as much as the artistry itself. I began hosting monthly live streams discussing technique and the emotional dimensions of tattoo art. I developed a particular reputation for transformation work, covering scars, creating memorial pieces that honored lost loved ones, and designing tattoos that helped people reclaim their bodies after trauma or major life changes. These projects brought the deepest satisfaction, turning painful experiences into beauty and meaning. Lisa, a 32-year-old domestic violence survivor, came to me wanting to cover the cigarette burns her ex-husband had inflicted across her shoulders. We designed a phoenix rising from ashes, the burns incorporated into the texture of the feathers. For years, I saw his cruelty every time I looked in the mirror, she told me after the final session. Now I see my own strength. Michael, a veteran who lost his leg in Afghanistan, asked for a tattoo that would help him process the experience. We created a design that flowed from realistic to abstract along his residual limb, incorporating elements from his service while acknowledging his journey toward healing. People stare at me for what I'm missing, he said. Now they'll see what I've gained instead: perspective, gratitude, resilience. These transformations extended beyond clients. My own life underwent a complete metamorphosis. Financial security, once an abstract concept, became reality. I purchased a condominium in Cambridge, a sunny top-floor space with large windows perfect for my painting studio. I built an investment portfolio with the guidance of a financial advisor. I even began funding a scholarship for art students interested in therapeutic applications of tattoo work. My personal life bloomed alongside professional success. I developed deep friendships with fellow artists and entrepreneurs who understood the challenges of building something from nothing. I dated occasionally, though the demands of growing a business left limited time for serious relationships. My chosen family expanded to include people who supported my authentic self. Diego, once just a colleague, became my closest friend and eventual business partner, bringing his expertise in traditional Japanese tattooing to complement my style. Tara visited regularly from New York, cheering each milestone. Jasmine remained a mentor, now more like an older sister than teacher. Therapy helped me process the family estrangement and establish healthier patterns. I learned to recognize how my upbringing had shaped certain perfectionist tendencies and fears of inadequacy. I worked through the grief of losing family connections while celebrating the freedom to define success on my own terms. Contact with my biological family dwindled to occasional lunches with mom at restaurants far from both the family home and my studio. These meetings held a bittersweet quality, her genuine interest in my life tempered by her unwillingness to challenge Dad's decisions. "He asks about you sometimes," she mentioned during one such lunch. "In his own way, I think he misses you. But not enough to call me himself," I noted without bitterness, simply stating fact. "You know your father. Pride is his greatest strength and greatest weakness." From these careful conversations, I gleaned fragments of information about the family business. Sales had plateaued, then declined slightly. Andrew had implemented aggressive expansion plans despite Dad's more conservative instincts. They'd opened new showrooms in markets that weren't performing as projected. I felt occasional pangs of concern for the family legacy, quickly replaced by the reminder that I'd been deemed irrelevant to that legacy. My energy belonged to building my own. Life settled into a new normal, busy, fulfilling, occasionally exhausting, but authentically mine. The pain of family rejection faded from acute to chronic, a background ache that flared occasionally but no longer dominated my emotional landscape. Then came the phone call that would upend everything again. The number appeared as unknown caller on a Tuesday afternoon between client appointments. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but some instinct prompted me to answer. Audrey Maxwell. I still used my family name professionally, a small connection I'd maintained despite everything. A moment of silence, then, "Audrey, it's your father." His voice, so familiar yet strange after 3 years of absence, sent a jolt through me. I stepped into my private office, closing the door. "Dad? Is everything okay? Is Mom?" "Your mother's fine," he interrupted. "Everyone's fine." "Well, not everything is fine, actually. That's why I'm calling." The awkwardness in his tone surprised me. Harold Maxwell, always commanding and certain, sounded hesitant, almost uncomfortable. "I wouldn't bother you, but the situation is complicated. The business is facing some challenges. Significant challenges." My grip tightened on the phone. Whatever I'd expected from this call after years of silence, it wasn't this. "What kind of challenges?" Dad sighed heavily. "Financial ones. The new showrooms Andrew pushed for haven't performed. The Chicago location is hemorrhaging money. And some investments he made, well, they didn't pan out." I sat down, processing this information. The mighty Maxwell Fine Furniture, the business my father had deemed too prestigious for someone with my filthy career, was in trouble. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said neutrally. "But I'm not sure why you're telling me this after 3 years of no contact." Another silence stretched between us. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped almost to a whisper. "We need capital. Quickly. The bank has called in some loans, and we're facing a cash flow crisis that could force us into bankruptcy within 60 days. And Andrew can't solve this problem?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Andrew's decisions created this problem, Dad admitted, an acknowledgement that must have cost him dearly. He took risks I advised against, made commitments based on overly optimistic projections. And now you need money," I finished for him. Yes, the word seemed physically painful for him to pronounce. $230,000 would bridge the gap until the seasonal orders come through in fall. We'd pay it back with interest, of course. The amount stunned me. While my business was successful, that figure represented most of my personal savings and investment portfolio. "That's a significant amount, Dad." "I know." His voice strengthened slightly. "Your mother mentioned your business is doing well. She showed me an article about your work in some magazine. No acknowledgement of my success. No congratulations. Just the implicit suggestion that since I had money, I should give it to them. I'll need to think about this, I said carefully. And I'd want to understand exactly what's happening with the business before making any decision. Dad's relief at not being immediately rejected gave way to defensiveness. We don't need you examining our books or questioning Andrew's leadership. We just need a short-term loan to weather the situation. The old familiar pattern. Dad dictating terms, expecting compliance without transparency. Some things hadn't changed. Those would be my conditions, I stated firmly. Complete financial transparency and involvement in the recovery plan. Otherwise, I'd be better off investing my money elsewhere. This is your family legacy at stake, he reminded me sharply. A legacy I was told I had no part in, I countered. Remember the birthday dinner, Dad? When you called my career filthy and cut me out of the will. When you said I'd made myself irrelevant to the Maxwell legacy. Silence again. I could almost see him struggling between pride and necessity. Things were said in anger. He finally offered, not quite an apology. Yes, they were. And now you're asking me for nearly $250,000 without even acknowledging that history. Diego knocked gently on my office door, signaling my next client had arrived. I need to get back to work, I said. I'll consider your request. But I'll need to meet with you, Mom, and Andrew in person, review the financial situation, and understand exactly what happened and what the plan is moving forward. That's non-negotiable. More silence. Then, fine. When can you come to the office? I don't think your office is the right setting. Let's meet on neutral ground. There's a conference room at my financial advisor's office we can use. After setting a time for later that week, I ended the call and sat motionless, trying to process what had just happened. 3 years of silence broken not by apology or reconciliation, but by a financial request. That evening, I called an emergency meeting with my closest confidants, Diego, Tara, via video chat, and my financial advisor, Karen Lewis. Over takeout in my living room, I laid out the situation. Can you afford this? Diego asked immediately, always practical. Karen reviewed my financial position. You could, technically. Between your savings and investments, you have about $300,000 in liquid or near-liquid assets. But it would leave you with minimal cushion for your business or personal emergencies. The question isn't just can you, but should you, Tara added. These people disowned you, Audrey. Called your work filthy. Cut you out of the will. And now they want your money. It's not that simple, I sighed. Yes, there's hurt and history. But it's still my family. And it's not just Dad and Andrew. It's also Mom, who's caught in the middle. Plus dozens of employees who depend on Maxwell for their livelihoods. What about a smaller amount? Diego suggested. Enough to show good faith but not drain your resources? Or strict loan terms? Karen proposed. If you do this, treat it as a business transaction. Formal paperwork, interest rates, repayment schedule, maybe even collateral. We discussed options late into the night. By morning, I'd made my decision. I would meet with my family, but I needed more information before committing any resources. The emotional weight of this choice demanded careful consideration. The meeting would bring me face to face with my father and brother for the first time in 3 years. Whatever happened next would require all the strength and clarity I'd built during our separation. Karen's office provided the professional neutrality I needed for this encounter. Located in a downtown high-rise with views of Boston Harbor, its sleek conference room with its polished table and ergonomic chairs established a business atmosphere rather than a family one. I arrived 30 minutes early to review documents with Karen and settle my nerves. Dressed in a tailored black pantsuit with one of my own designs visible at my collarbone, a small compass rose symbolizing finding one's true path, I felt armored for the confrontation ahead. My family arrived precisely on time. Dad entered first, looking older than I remembered. His hair had grayed significantly, and new lines marked his face. Mom followed, her eyes lighting up at the sight of me before quickly schooling her expression to neutrality. Andrew came last, his former smugness replaced by a tense wariness. Audrey, Dad nodded formally. This is Karen Lewis, my financial advisor, I introduced. She'll be helping us understand the situation today. We settled around the table, the awkwardness palpable. Mom attempted small talk about the weather while Karen distributed folders containing questionnaires about the business's current financial status. I thought we could start by getting a clear picture of where things stand, I explained. Then discuss potential paths forward. Dad frowned at the paperwork. I told you the situation on the phone. We need a bridge loan until fall shipments. With all due respect, Mr. Maxwell, Karen interjected smoothly, any financial arrangement of this magnitude requires proper due diligence. Audrey is approaching this professionally, as I'm sure you can appreciate. Andrew scoffed quietly. Professional tattoo artist. Still sounds like an oxymoron. Andrew, Mom cautioned. What? We're sitting here begging for money from someone who draws on people for a living. It's humiliating. More humiliating than bankrupting a 3-generation family business? I asked evenly. Color flooded Andrew's face. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Let's focus on the matter at hand, he said. The business needs capital. Audrey apparently has capital. We're family despite our differences. That should be sufficient. It's not, I stated firmly. Family didn't matter when you cut me out of the will. Family didn't matter during 3 years of silence. So we'll approach this as a business transaction with appropriate transparency and terms. Dad looked like he might argue, then deflated slightly. Fine. What do you need to know? Over the next 2 hours, a clearer picture emerged. Andrew had indeed pursued aggressive expansion against Dad's more conservative judgment. The new Chicago showroom, leased in an ultra-premium location, had dramatically underperformed projections. Additionally, Andrew had invested heavily in a furniture manufacturing technology that proved incompatible with Maxwell's craftsmanship-focused production methods. Most critically, he'd secured these ventures with cross-collateralized loans that now put the entire company at risk. The cash flow crisis wasn't just about the new ventures failing, it threatened the stable, profitable core business. So you gambled the entire company on untested markets and technology, I summarized, looking at Andrew. Without adequate contingency planning. I took calculated risks to modernize an increasingly outdated business model, he countered defensively. The market is changing. Maxwell needs to change with it. Change doesn't mean abandoning what made the company successful in the first place, I pointed out. The Maxwell reputation is built on craftsmanship and quality, not cutting-edge technology or trendy locations. What would you know about it? Andrew snapped. You haven't been involved in years. Because I wasn't allowed to be, I reminded him calmly. But I do know something about building a successful business from nothing. About balancing growth with sustainability. About staying true to core values while evolving. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Mom looked between us anxiously. Dad stared at the financial projections with a grim expression. Andrew tapped his pen against the table in agitation. So will you help or not? Dad finally asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. I took a deep breath, centering myself for what came next. Before I answer that, I need to say something. I straightened in my chair, meeting each family member's eyes in turn. 3 years ago, you told me I had disappointed the family. That my career choice was filthy. That I had made myself irrelevant to the Maxwell legacy. Dad shifted uncomfortably but didn't interrupt. Those words hurt deeply. But they also freed me to build something authentic to who I am. I've created a business that's not just financially successful but meaningful. My work helps people heal, celebrate, commemorate. There's nothing filthy or shameful about that. We understand you've done well, Mom interjected gently. We're proud of. Are you? I challenged. Because this is the first time anyone has expressed that sentiment. Dad called because you need money, not because you've had a change of heart about my career. Andrew rolled his eyes. Is this really necessary? The emotional processing? Yes, I said firmly. Because if I'm going to invest in saving the family business, I need to know where we stand. I won't be the dirty little secret you take money from while maintaining public disdain for my work. Dad cleared his throat. What exactly are you asking for, Audrey? Acknowledgement. Respect. Not necessarily approval, but recognition that my path has value, even if it's not the one you would have chosen for me. And if we provide this recognition? Dad asked cautiously. Then yes, I'll help. But with conditions. I nodded to Karen, who distributed a second set of documents. I'm prepared to provide $150,000 as an investment, not a loan. In exchange, I would receive a 15% ownership stake in Maxwell Fine Furniture and a position on the board of directors. Andrew nearly jumped from his chair. That's outrageous. You can't just waltz back in and demand ownership after abandoning the business. I didn't abandon anything. I was forced out, I corrected. And I'm not demanding. I'm offering terms for an investment that could save the company. The alternative is bankruptcy, which would leave everyone with nothing. 15% is steep, Dad said, studying the proposal. It's actually below market rate for the risk level, Karen noted professionally. A venture capitalist would likely demand 30% or more in this situation, with far more restrictive oversight provisions. Dad's expression suggested he recognized the truth in this statement. After decades in business, he understood negotiation and fair value. I would attend quarterly board meetings and have input on major decisions, I continued. But I wouldn't be involved in day-to-day operations. My focus remains on my own business. And the remaining $80,000 we need? Dad asked. I can provide that as a conventional loan with reasonable interest and a 2-year repayment period. Karen has outlined the proposed terms. Mom looked between Dad and me anxiously. Andrew fumed silently. The weight of the decision hung in the air between us. Dad stared at the documents for what felt like eternity. I could almost see the internal struggle, his pride warring with practical necessity, old resentments battling with reluctant respect for the businesswoman I'd become. Finally, he looked up. You've built something impressive, Audrey. Your studio. Your reputation. I don't pretend to understand or approve of tattoos, but... He paused, the words clearly difficult. I can acknowledge that you've succeeded on your own terms. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Harold Maxwell, it was significant. I'll need to review these terms in detail with our lawyers, he continued, tapping the proposal. But in principle, I believe we can work with this framework. Andrew started to protest, but Dad silenced him with a look. The alternative is bankruptcy, Andrew. Your sister is offering us a lifeline with more favorable terms than we'd get anywhere else. Whatever our personal feelings, this is the right business decision. The meeting concluded with tentative agreement pending legal review. As we prepared to leave, Mom hugged me tightly. Come for dinner soon, she whispered. Just to talk. No business. Dad shook my hand formally, but held it a moment longer than necessary. You drive a hard bargain. You get that from me, I suppose. Andrew left without speaking, his back rigid with resentment. As I watched them go, I felt neither triumph nor vindication, just a quiet certainty that something fundamental had shifted. The relationship would never return to what it had been before our estrangement, but perhaps it could evolve into something new. Something based on mutual respect rather than obligation or expectation. 1 year after that pivotal meeting, I sat in my studio reviewing the latest quarterly reports from Maxwell Fine Furniture. The company had stabilized remarkably. The Chicago showroom had been downsized to a more appropriate location. The core business of handcrafted, high-quality furniture had been re-emphasized in all marketing materials. Most importantly, the cross-collateralized loans had been restructured to protect the company's foundational assets. My 15% ownership had proven less about control and more about having a voice. At quarterly board meetings, I offered perspective from outside the family bubble, sometimes challenging traditional thinking, sometimes supporting it, always focused on balancing tradition with innovation. Dad had gradually come to value my input, particularly regarding marketing to younger demographics and developing an online presence that maintained the brand's prestige. Though he'd never be comfortable with tattoo culture, he'd stopped using the word filthy to describe my profession. Andrew's adjustment proved more challenging. Initially resentful of my involvement, he maintained a cool, professional distance during meetings. Over time, as the business recovered under the modified strategy, his hostility thawed slightly. We weren't friends or even friendly siblings, but we'd reached a détente based on mutual interest in the company's success. My relationship with Mom blossomed most significantly. Our monthly dinners became weekly. She visited my studio for the first time, initially nervous, but increasingly interested in understanding my work. She even introduced me to her friends without apology or explanation, simply as my daughter Audrey, the artist. Inked narratives continued thriving alongside my involvement with Maxwell. We'd expanded to a second location in Portland, with Diego managing that studio while I maintained the Boston flagship. My waiting list stretched to 6 months despite higher rates. A documentary filmmaker had approached me about featuring my transformative work with trauma survivors in an upcoming project. My personal life found balance too. I'd been dating James, an architect with his own firm, for 8 months. He appreciated both my artistic side and my business acumen, understanding the demanding schedule of an entrepreneur because he lived it himself. Life wasn't perfect. Family gatherings still held moments of tension. Dad occasionally made tone-deaf comments about my unusual career. Andrew could be dismissive during disagreements at board meetings. But compared to the complete estrangement of 3 years, the current reality felt like remarkable progress. The greatest change wasn't in my family, but in me. I no longer sought approval or validation from outside sources. My worth wasn't determined by inclusion in a will or acceptance of my career choices. I'd built success, meaning, and community on my own terms. The irony wasn't lost on me. Being cut out of the family fortune had forced me to create my own. Being labeled irrelevant to the family legacy had freed me to establish a personal legacy that eventually helped save the very business that had rejected me. Life's strange symmetry continued to surprise me. The skills that made me a successful tattoo artist, listening deeply to clients, translating complex emotions into visual language, creating beauty from pain, translated unexpectedly well to helping navigate family business dynamics. As I closed the quarterly report and prepared for my afternoon client, I reflected on the journey. From business school dropout to successful studio owner. From disinherited daughter to board member. From seeking external validation to finding internal strength. The path hadn't been straight or easy, but it had been authentically mine. And that made all the difference. If you've ever had to stand your ground against family expectations or found yourself succeeding in ways your loved ones couldn't understand, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Has anyone else experienced the irony of being rejected only to become the solution later? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want more stories about finding your own path even when others don't approve. Remember, sometimes being cut out of someone else's plan is the beginning of discovering your own. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to follow your authentic path wherever it leads.